wrapping up the football season, we can kind of talk about the final rankings. Michigan, I believe, ends up being number 3 behind, I want to say, I think it's Alabama and Georgia. Georgia obviously 1, Alabama 2, I believe, and then Michigan number 3. So, Dre, or I guess, what are your thoughts on that number 3, ranking as far as the final ranking goes?
I mean, it's a nice consolation, to the season. I mean, at the end of the day, I judge the season based on what you accomplish and especially what kind of trophies you won. And so, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have cared if we were ranked. This is just me. I wouldn't care if we were ranked 7 or third, um, or 10th. We got the Big Ten title. We got to our first college football playoff invitational. That's pretty cool. But this ranking. I mean, to me, when you look at this season historically, you won't think about where we finished ranked. You'll think about the championship. So that's really how I look at it. But it's cool.
Before the season started, I don't think any of us would have predicted Michigan finishing there. So I definitely it's like, I mean, right before we kicked off, Mark had mentioned it's the highest they've finished in 24 years. So that part is pretty incredible. There's the historic piece of that, but I agree with you, Dre. The thing that Michigan fans are going to remember is beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten championship, and getting to the playoffs. So, Mark, what is your thoughts on it?
Well, I was going to ask Dre, as the one guy that has his emotions invested here in Michigan football, if it matters. So we answered my question before I got a chance to ask it, but some people, the rankings matter to them. I find it more and more with the playoff being what it is, that people are super, super invested in the rankings during the season, even not the college football playoff rankings, even the AP and the coaches poll before the playoff rankings, they care. I point to my own videos in terms of how many people watch the rankings that I release versus I released my final rankings the day after the championship game. And it seems like people are like, yeah, whatever. They're going to be ranked at the end of the season. I don't care. But they cared during the season. And I don't know if that was all tied to the playoff. But I got
Absolutely.
to tell you, growing up, I sure did care what the rankings were. Like I cared too much what the rankings were. Like, you catch me at 15, 20 years old, and if I think Ohio State should be number 5 and they're number 8, like, I'm ready to pick a fight. Like it. And now I take it in more as, well, how much respect do I have for the people that are involved in the rankings? Well, it depends on the individual. I think some of them are very capable, knowledgeable, and competent, and others aren't. And I see so many discrepancies with the rankings and inconsistencies that I don't take it to heart.
Yeah, I think one part of it that is important and is different now is the college football playoff, because when you look at the AP and coaches poll, right? So there's the way too early top 25 is out already, and Michigan is, I believe, 5. That's important because you look at, let's fast forward to next season, right? A one-loss Michigan team with a preseason ranking of 5 is much different than a one-loss Michigan team that is unranked, that starts the season unranked. I think you still probably get to the same end result, but depending on how things fall, that it does kind of come into play a little bit. I think with the Big Ten being as strong of a conference as it is, it's probably more much ado about nothing. But for some teams, I mean, I look at Wake Forest. I think that if their season, I don't think they were ranked preseason. So you look at how things ended there. That those things are important now, the preseason rankings for teams, because of the playoff, and really they don't vary that much from the AP and the coaches poll, really, the CFP until the actual last ranking. I mean, they're pretty much just grabbing the AP poll, coaches poll, kind of a pretty close mashup, giving us one thing to kind of be upset about and talk about for a week, and then rolling. So that part, I think the preseason, although it you still have to go out and win the games, those things do matter when it comes to the end of the season, especially October, November, when the CFP rankings first start to roll out.
Yeah, and I think it's just like it's just the end of the season rankings is when everything has already been done. Like beforehand, when you're going through the season, that's when you start to dream. That's when you start to set goals, right? And those rankings on a week by week basis are your tracker of how you are trending towards those goals potentially. Besides just the win and loss column, right? Who you beat, right? Because you could be playing a soft schedule, but as long as you're going up the rankings like you're supposed to, or staying in the hunt like you're supposed to, like say for example, Michigan has a really weak schedule next year, where if they're already at 5, they never lose a game. Well, but you're going to be watching that closely. Like, okay, let's make sure we stay around 5. So as long as because when we do get to our tougher games, Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State later in the season, then that will help give us an extra boost to get to the playoff, right? So, but once you already gone through the playoff, you're going through the conference championship, and like, hey, just so you know, you finished third in the country. Well, the season's over. We've already accomplished what we can accomplish, right? There's nothing that we can use and it's not like that ranking is going to carry over to next year. It's not as of now. So, like you finish third, you're going to start off third next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, okay. Maybe it'll be a little bit more interesting if that was the case, but that's not how it works either. So, it's just kind of like, oh, I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, like, I think it's clear that Michigan isn't Bama or Georgia. I think those teams that you saw it on Monday night, that they are 1 and 2. And then, look, Michigan, I think is a better team than Cincinnati. They're at 3. And if you want to argue Cincinnati, Ohio State at 4, that's fine. But, other than that, I think they got it. I think it's a correct ranking. But I got to say this, there's a pretty big gap between 3, 1, and 2. I can say that. And that's, that's the harsh reality as a Michigan fan, and for the most part, a Big Ten team fan, is that hell, even Ohio State at times really hasn't played well for the most part against those teams. It's kind of like, man, yeah, we finish high in the season, or we're in the mix, but when push comes to shove, when you play those top tier SEC teams, you're like, man, that's a whole nother level. We may be in the top 5, but we're not 1 and 2. So it's it's definitely eye opening.
So I'm going to challenge you on that one point there. So other than one game, when has Ohio State in the last 7 or 8 years not played well against an SEC team?
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, they had a bad game in the national championship game. They got whipped.
So you're going to say that?
No doubt.
So you're going to say, okay, that's it's probably more recency bias for sure, Mark. With the game that was the 2020 national title game, Bama Ohio State, that wasn't very good, and it wasn't an SEC team. It was Clemson, who you guys got beat by in 2016, and then you guys got them for sure in 2020, pretty good.
And then 2015, the inaugural playoff, they ended up beating Bama.
They beat Bama that year. What about? So now all these years start to mix together now.
I feel like Ohio State's matched up against Clemson quite a bit. Am I off on that?
Oh yeah, 3 times in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean that's
they got whipped.
Playoff, and they've won one.
The first time.
They've lost. So the first there was one that you lost twice. One, I thought that it was a really cheap roughing the passer call that I thought changed the landscape of that game. I can't remember the safety.
Yeah, we'll stay with Michigan. We don't want to get me started on that. So,
yeah. No, but anyway, I thought that what was that, 17, 18? I know it was Trevor Lawrence on that Clemson team.
That was in 19.
The year before you guys beat them. It was a really good game, and Justin Fields got a last minute pick. It was 19?
Yep. 19.
Okay. It was 19. So, I guess you guys, I mean, they're not an SEC team. But the overall point is that we don't win as being titles. That's the SEC, the Bamas and the Georgia, especially Bama. So, and that goes for all of us.
the part
Go
that's
ahead.
interesting is I think about the national championship, and I think when it comes to that Georgia roster, how they looked, you look at the flip side of Alabama, who had, we can all argue, or I think we're all in agreement, they had the best quarterback in the country with Bryce Young. And to me, even with how Alabama struggled offensively, he still looked amazing. But the thing is you look at how difficult it is to overcome a team that's just that talented. For Georgia, that defense, it was consistently a bend don't break. And when they got in the red zone, I mean, just consistently it was, yeah, we're just going to hold you to a field goal. You can't do anything down here. Now, play calling wasn't great, but I mean, there's not too much you can do down that when you're playing a defense like that. Like, they're just loaded, and that kind of takes me to, for Michigan, their next step. Like, I think for me, I think it's just kind of stay the course. Like, as far as Michigan, what they need to do to get to that next step, like you mentioned, Dre, of getting to, in that competition of the top one or two teams, what do you need to do? Really, I think it's number one, stay the course, because Michigan recruits well. But the biggest thing that they have to do is you have to have one or two electric guys on the outside. And I think that's probably the one thing that they do not have. I mean, you could argue the Xavier Worthy, who you had on campus, but didn't work out with, whatever the case may be. There's rumors, but didn't work out there. But when I look at, Alabama with Jamison Williams, John Mechie, Georgia with George Pickens, he's on another level. And their other receiver, number 7, I'm not sure what his name was, but he was terrorizing the Alabama defenders. And then also Brock Bowers. I don't think Michigan has that guy today. Now, I'm not, super involved with who they have coming in as far as freshmen goes, but I think that's what's going to get you to the next level, because you look at Alabama in the SEC championship. How on earth did they beat Georgia the way they did? When you turn around and see what happened in the national championship, well, Jamison Williams was on the field for that game, and you had John Mechie for half of the game. So I think that's probably the thing that you're missing, because I think that's the great equalizer, is having a receiver who on one play can get you 65 yards and a touchdown. Like that, there's not too much you can do with that. And I think that's the one thing that Michigan needs to get to really put them at that next level, take that next step. Because, yeah, I mean, like I said, I just mentioned the guys with Alabama, Georgia. You look at Ohio State; they just had 3 guys like that, and one of them's coming back. So I think to really get to that next level, I think that is one of the things that is missing. And really, I would say that's just about it. But Dre,
Well,
you seem to have some disagreements. So what say you?
no, I think you said that beautifully, Desmond. I just don't think it will ever happen. I think. No, seriously. I mean, no, I agree. No, we do. That would be very, very helpful, and definitely will help close gaps when we get, elite 5-star kids on the outside with 4.3, 4.2 speed, and that'll be fantastic if we can get that. But unfortunately, it's just in college football has always been like this in different eras, and there was different teams, and it was, I'm sound redundant, but different reasons why. But it's the have and have nots, and I just think that until there is a change, and my personal thing is in the amount of scholarships that these teams can have, you're going to continue to have like this gap, because um and you might see more, for example, USC. You might see Lincoln Riley start to flip some of these kids, high caliber kids that are going from California, they're going into SEC territory. They're going to Ohio State, right? You might see him start to keep some of those kids, but for the most part, now I mean, kids will go from anywhere across the country to these powerhouses, and it's literally it's SEC territory. And then when you think about what Texas A&M just did this past recruiting, and when they really are breaking off the dollar bills, like it's that's what you have to do when you're a have not. And A&M, they're in a very good geographical area, naturally being in Texas. However, they don't have the cachet that Bama or Georgia or the other teams have. So now they've had to find another way to try to get kids on campus. So Michigan's going to have to think outside the box besides to stay the course and recruit and hope you just find some of these kids. You're not going to get those kids unless you do something different like what Texas A&M did. I'm not proposing they do that, just spend a ton of NIL money and stuff like that, but they're going to have to figure out something because they just a basic recruiting strategy, especially what they tend to focus in their geographical area. It's just not going to that's just not going to get close that gap, and that's just the reality,
Well, I would push back a little bit just because two things. Number one, like I mentioned, from what we saw with Xavier Worthy, granted it was some limited time. I think it was basically the last 6 games he started to come on a bit, and I think he had a 200-yard receiving game in the last home stretch of the season. You had that guy on campus. Like, you had that guy ready to put on maize and blue and play for you.
Man, you need more than one guy though, brother.
Well, but I mean, you can't get the second guy if you don't have the first one. You know what I mean? And he was you had him there. And two, when you think about the geographic location of college campuses, most of them are not in big cities. And right. I would argue for the state of Michigan, Ann Arbor is a big city. So you have that advantage. Granted, I get it. It's cold weather and people can argue that all the time, but I see other places in the North get guys who can play some football. So
no, let's be more specific. That Ohio State gets guys to come up and play where it's cold. Okay,
correct. Yeah. I saw David Bell run off 200 yards against anybody who wanted to see him, and right. Purdue is up here in the North and the Midwest as well. So I think those are fallacies. I think this is the landscape in college football we're in today is facilities, coaching, and can I get to the next level? Those are the things that kids essentially want.
You forgot a big one. It's winning, and when just like Monday night, it's the reinforcement of what these kids see all the time. Is that you see that team that does not have a logo on their helmet, but they got the white stripe going down the middle and numbers on the side. And that's it. That's what you see, and you want to go there. And I'm not hating, but it just is what it is. And you see team like, I see Georgia all the time. I want to go to Georgia. It's just like
change,
huh?
That all can change. When Nick Saban got to Alabama, they were losing 6-7 games a year.
Lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they were losing to Louisiana Monroe. They were still Alabama historically. Like, he didn't create Alabama. He's not Dabo. Well, Dabo Swinney didn't create Clemson, but to a certain extent, as an elite team program, he did. So Alabama had all of this amazing history that was arguably, even before Nick Saban, the greatest in college football. Yeah. It was in that conversation, but it hadn't been that for 7-8 years, and they weren't getting good recruiting classes.
Really, when you look at it, the turning point for Alabama was Julio Jones. He was the guy that was high-level recruit, went to Alabama and started bringing guys with him, like recruiting other guys. And really, when I look at the parallel, I would probably look at J.J. McCarthy. I would look at a guy who is a high-level recruit, 5-star, who has no qualms in trying to recruit other high-level guys to come and play with him. I mean, I think there's a receiver running back that he played with at IMG Academy who is now a senior that he's trying to get on campus. And JJ is a great mouthpiece for Michigan. So even where maybe Jim Harbaugh wouldn't be able to reach a certain kid, JJ may have that relationship with that specifically the guy he played with. I mean, a high school teammate, that's as good of a relationship as you're going to have. So like Mark said, I mean, it can change, and you, like I said, you just got to get one guy to change it. And JJ also is a quarterback that Michigan traditionally hasn't recruited as far as a high level 5-star guy. I mean, we can talk Shea Patterson, but we saw how that worked out. But it could change with JJ.
He was a 5-star.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also, and this is where speculation. This is part of Harbaugh. What Harbaugh wants, to have more freedom at Michigan with the transfer portal and having more expansion with NIL, is in in terms of getting guys able to be accepted into the university. Um, the transfer portal can help too, because you just saw a few players hit the transfer portal from Bama and Georgia recently, and I do believe that that is a potential avenue that, let's say, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, maybe Ohio State, those guys are, tier one, right? Especially, let's say Alabama's depth, Georgia, especially Alabama's tier one, right? And then you got tier 1B, right? Is there Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, right? And I think tier two is like Michigan and then those type of teams, okay? Maybe the avenue for those teams in tier two to kind of take a step up, maybe not on a consistent basis, but maybe once every 4 years, is that you're able to really hit on some transfer portal guys. I think that's an avenue that Michigan can explore. Think if Michigan had a running back like Kenneth Walker the third, right? Now I really like Hassan Haskins. I like Blake Corum, but they're not individually as good as K9. Like, I thought Ken Walker the third was the best running back in the country this year. I believe that. And if I'm not mistaken, he was a 3-star recruit going to, what was it, Wake Forest,
Mm-hmm.
right? 3-star. And so, like, if you're able to potentially hit on kids like that, hitting gems and guys who are highly recruited, the guys who are at the Georgias and Bama's who decided, you know what, there's a Will Anderson kid in front of me. I'm not going to play for another year. Maybe it's time that I leave. And I'm a pretty good defensive end / linebacker myself. I just need the opportunity. Well, if you're Michigan, you swoop in, hey, son, we just won a Big Ten title. We were in the playoff. We're losing a lot of linebackers. We're losing 2 pass rushers. Maybe you can come play for us and start right away. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's a potential avenue to close the gap on a one-off year type basis. But I don't know if there's anything that Michigan can do. I'm not saying it's impossible. I believe it when I'll see it, to be on that level consistently.
Go ahead,
I'm
Mark.
gonna I'm gonna go another direction in terms of where Desmond was pointing to the gap between the two teams. And I'm not discounting, Des, what you had to say about the wide receiver and being able to get a couple of explosive guys. But I think this is where Ohio State's fallen behind too. And they've got the best wide receiver room in the country, and not that Michigan can't upgrade there. And Xavier Worthy, even without an established quarterback at Texas, still had an amazing season and showed what his future could be. But man, when I see N'Kobe Dean and Nolan Smith and Devontae Wyatt and just waves and waves of dudes at D line that can run, even though they're massively huge. And in N'Kobe Dean, obviously, he's a differently built athlete, just a missile. I think that front seven on defense is a difference.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely.
that's interesting. Yeah. Well, and I, because you look at Michigan, and obviously they had the 2 stars up front in Aiden and Ajabo, but when we talked about the run game, as far as the linebacking core, there was something to be desired there. I think overall they played well, but you didn't see guys flashing the way that N'Kobe Dean and the Georgia guys were flashing, and
It's a different
it's
speed,
different.
man. It's a different speed, man. The
Hmm.
scene, and I seen the way that N'Kobe Dean and what was number 41? Gosh, I can't think of his name. Something Till. I can't think
Oh,
of it.
Tyndall,
Yeah,
Channing Tyndall.
yeah, like the way, like, to see those guys flash and just burst through the line of scrimmage through those tackles for loss. I mean, that's a different type of speed, man. And no offense to Josh Ross, that Josh Ross was doing stuff like, yeah, like it's a different level.
Hmm.
It's a different level. Like we, for example, like there was a play in the Michigan Georgia game, and we tried to do like a double reverse or something like that, or a swing pass of Blake Corum, and like they just blew that thing up like 5 yards in the backfield. And most teams that would have worked, like, but the speed and the recognition and be able to make up ground, it's just different. It's different.
Michigan ran a play probably about 4 series deep into the game where it was obvious, hey, you need to be doing something different. You need to get the ball out of your hand. They ran a play where McNamara, I felt horrible for him because I could see it coming from the time they snapped the ball. They had a jet sweep, fake handoff, and then a crisscross with a nut. They had a double fake, and he's just standing there for like an eternity, and boom, he turns around and gets blasted. And I'm like, why did you call that play? It takes too long.
Yeah.
Yep. That's not what you want. That's not what you
With that type of speed, like, you can do that against certain Big Ten teams because you can hold your own up front.
Or if
But-
you've been beating them down on the ground and
Right.
they're a little bit on their heels, like, okay, we're playing the run. We've been, boom, 6, 7, 8 yards a pop. And then all of a sudden you do something like that. But that wasn't the case.
No. We're getting blown up, and at that point, like to your point, Mark, Georgia's coming like those guys come like a bat out of hell. They're like, they can't block us, so we're just and they're definitely not beating us deep with the pass, So I definitely agree with that, and it's and that Devin, I see some people bringing out Devin Bush. Devin Bush is a great example. Devin Bush was a kid with that kind of elite speed at the linebacker position. And he had not only ability to burst through the line of scrimmage and get tackles for loss, but he was also fantastic sideline to sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tough to get outside of him. And so, no, I think that's a great example. But here's the thing. Those Alabama and Georgias, they normally have 2 or 3 Devin Bush type kids, right? Now, they may not all go in the first round like Devin Bush did, right? But in terms of pure athletic, raw ability, that's how it is. And so if teams like Michigan, they're going to have to find a way to get more than just one-offs, and they got to get a few of those kids, and it all to me starts with getting really better, taking advantage of the NIL,